My name is Bernard Jiri, a senior researcher at the Institute of Public Finance.
Yeah, so sir, you released a research today of which you are part of the research team, yeah, and you say that you talked about our debt. Can you tell us what situation are we in terms of debt?
Yes, thank you. Today we have launched the Kenya Macrofiscal Analytics Snapshot, where we use publicly available data to do the analysis. And one area that we have covered is Kenya's public debt. The situation as of now, we can say we are still at a high risk of debt distress, although we have not faced that crisis. But there is a huge concern, especially when it comes to the Eurobond maturing in June this year. We have to make a bullet payment of 2 billion USD. So that is an issue that we are keen on, especially considering that our national international reserves are low. So if that issue is unaddressed, we are likely to draw down on our reserves, and that will greatly affect our imports. But for now, we do not see a scenario where Kenya is likely to default, but we are still distressed when it comes to debt. Our levels are high. And our debt interest is also taking a significant portion of our revenue. Why do I say that our debt level is high? In 2013, 2014, our public debt was at 2 trillion. And by June last year, 2023, our debt level had exceeded 10 trillion. So that tells you that our debt has grown by more than 5 times. And that keeps putting pressure on our debt interest. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're talking about our debt. We are not yet in a situation where we can default, yeah, but we can see our debt has already surpassed the debt ceiling, yeah, per se, and we can see that our local domestic debt is at the most highest right now, yeah. What do you think about this and our current situation of the current situation of our inflation?
Thank you. You have talked about two critical issues. You have talked about our debt, that we are not yet distressed. But I want to tie that with the question you have asked about inflation, because our currency continues to depreciate. And what that means is our debt interest, our international debt obligation keep growing because of the depreciation. And that depreciation again is feeding into our imports. And what we are experiencing now is the import pass-through effect, because a weak currency makes our imports expensive, and that feeds into inflation. So if our currency keeps depreciating, our inflation pressure will keep growing. But so far, the central bank has done well in terms of managing inflation rate. We are doing way better compared to our peers like Nigeria and Egypt, where inflation is close to 30%. But in Kenya now we are below the 7.5% upper bound that is targeted by the Central Bank of Kenya.
Yeah, with the higher cost of living, you can see taxes being raised every day and things coming up. Do you think this is the best way to manage this particular debt and be able to manage our inflation?
Thank you. I want to say that inflation and tax are not really directly related. Why do I say so? Inflation, as we are experiencing right now, is due to the supply side shocks. But the taxation regime that we are implementing now as a country is due to the debt pressure. Because government is trying to minimize borrowing, that's as per the award. Although we see government going to the market every now and then to borrow, Recently, we had the IMF approve a facility under the extended credit facility and the extended fund facility. So we are still borrowing, even if government is giving us an assurance that our debt therefore is not likely to grow. But what I can say about taxation, the pressure is coming from the debt interest repayment that we are experiencing as a country.
Yeah, final question as you come to a conclusion. You talked about now how the expenditure and the inflation in terms of urban areas and our rural areas. Yeah, what relation do you think they may have?
Yes, thank you. I talked about our poverty level at the national level, and then we disaggregated that into rural and urban. And what I can say is that due to the pandemic, we have lost about 3 to 4 years of the progress we had made in terms of poverty reduction. But now, although our poverty has resumed a downward trend, what we see is poverty being higher in the rural areas relative to urban areas, where more than 40% in the rural areas live below $2 a day. And that kind of imbalance in terms of poverty reduction is because of the issue I talked about. Is our growth, leading to income or resources distribution? Is it evenly, or is it leaving the rural areas behind? Is our growth sustainable? Is our growth equitable? So that clearly shows it's not, because of how the rural areas are lagging behind when it comes to poverty reduction. So that again calls for targeted measures, policy reduction measures that can help those in the rural areas, and also making our growth sustainable and equitable.
What do you think is causing this now, so that we have now more expansion in the rural areas compared to the in the urban areas compared to the rural areas?
What one thing that could be the cause? One is the adverse shocks that have been experienced over the recent years, especially in the agriculture sector. Remember, most people in the agriculture sector depend largely on agriculture. We had shocks, emanating from drought, and the agriculture sector is the largest employer in the rural areas. So that could be an issue that has affected poverty reduction in the rural areas. But again, like I said, we can't just take that in isolation. We also have to consider other measures taken by the government in poverty reduction, and then we go a step further to analyze whether those measures have been effective in rural areas the same way we see them quite effective in the urban areas.
Tunaona, tunasikia na tutabonga. The voice.